In a room dim with computer glows, a goat inspects, striking a pose. Mic in hand, she starts the show. Questions fly, authors disclose. Indy authors in the seed of fame, tales of adventure or love untamed. Writers who deserve more acclaim, sharing their stories, joys and pain. What's your dream? Chat has questions as they stream. A quirky quest through the unforeseen. Authors laughing, eyes agleam.
And good evening, everyone. Hey, Rachel. Popping in just on time. So, Farv has suggested that I give an intro, and I originally said I wasn't going to, but I've had kind of a quirky day today, so I'm just going to preface by apologizing ahead of time if my brain tends to wander. Tonight's guest is Farv, at least internet known as Farv. Michael K. Rose, I believe, is what your book is published under.
That's right.
Take a quick moment to say hello to the chat. We have Rachel, who popped in just in time. We have Eraserhead, our super mod. And we have the Tater. Everybody's favorite Tater. I assume we'll have more people that'll pop in as we go. But
says the guy who's actually hung out with me in person and actually knows my name.
I bet he still called you Farv.
He did.
I mean, I would probably do the same thing, mainly because I am completely unable to remember more than one name. Like, even first and last names, like, forget it. You get a first name or a last name.
The amount of conversations I had with people getting grumpy with me about the amount of names in my book.
I didn't get grumpy over the names in your book. I did. So I am really terrible at remembering names in fantasy as well as in real life. And so my brain tends to literally just transfer them to whatever the first letter is. And so when you have 3 names that start with D, I'm really screwed. I keep having to flip back and figure out like who I'm actually talking about. So you had a couple that were fairly close, I think. It actually took me a while to realize there were 2 different characters.
It probably the 2 brothers when the one came into the picture was a bit of that was actually partially a joke even.
No, actually, because the length of the name was enough different. But there literally was a D name. One was a bad guy, and now I don't remember who the other one was.
The one most prevalent bad guy with a D name would have been Denigrath. So I'm not.
Hello to Mr. Nobody Presents.
There's my brother in the chat.
Yeah, I struggle with Tolkien, who likes to, do Biffer and Bomber and Badger and Philly and Nilly, Feely and Neely and,
Keely and Feely and yeah.
I'm like, this is why everyone just ends up going, those guys. We have the head dwarf and we have everyone else. That's all we need to know. Rachel has all her A names. What did you? Are you one of those people that named all of your children like Adam and Audrey and I don't know for people? Yeah.
The ones that might have possibly
butchering those names hurt my soul. How do you think I feel?
The ones that might have tripped you up too is the fact that the main character's name starts with an M, and then the one they meet later who hangs around for a lot of the book also has an M name.
That threw me, but not for as long as the bad guy and whoever the other demon was. It's an ongoing joke in my family because I mean I own more books than some small towns have in their libraries, like literally. And I can tell you the plot of every book I've ever read, but I cannot tell you the main character in the book I'm reading now. I really, really can't do names. It's terrible. But yes, no, I did not have. I mean, I read George Martin, so therefore, 40 million names in a book does not bother me. All right, now we're just getting fancy.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, none of that here. None of us. Okay, so not metaphorical children, not like literal children. So my husband's family has named the first son the same first and middle name for like, I don't know, since the days of Charlemagne, literally.
Oh, wow.
And my husband, his son, and his father all have a birthday within 10 days of each other. So we're constantly getting my stepson's speeding tickets because
Oh, no.
and my father-in-law's medical bills and everything else, even though we don't even live remotely in the same town.
Mm.
Yeah, don't do that.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, on to the actual topic for being here. Not just the names in Farv's book, but the book itself. You said you have one handy to show off to the world?
In fact, it's right here. This is the hardcover, and yeah, the light's not green here. This is the hardcover edition. There is an ebook version available also, just for anybody who's curious. It's a little large.
It's hefty.
And you can see the amount of, kind of see the amount of print we have on the page thanks to my camera here. There we go.
I think it might have taken me longer to read than anything has in a very long time. I mean, not quite since Tolkien, but probably pretty close. Is there a pop version available?
A pop. He's always asked me to make pop-up books.
Little centaur that pops up when you. Can you imagine how huge that book would be if you had to like make a pop-up book out of it?
Considering this book is almost 500 pages long, I don't want to imagine how big that would have to be.
So, how did you wake up one day and decide you were going to write a book?
I'd kind of poked at writing. So I started out as an artist before I went into the military, to the point my parents had me enrolled in an invitation-only art college back in frickin' California before I got the hell out of there. But art was really, around the time I was going to college, was going hard into CG and away from hand-drawn art. And that was really starting already to look like kind of a dead-end road. And we had a big blow-up with my family and I left home. And went to my aunt's for about 6 months before I joined the military the first time. And just left the state. I dropped out of the art college my final semester before finals. I just gave up. It didn't look like there was any future in it. So I kind of refocused into, I'm not going to talk about Cal Arts, brother. So I kind of refocused into writing because I'd done the writing for some of the stuff I'd worked on drawing wise before. At one point I was trying to write a comic before I just kind of dropped all of it. And I just kind of poked at writing here and there. I'd take a random story and write it. None of it ever went anywhere back then. And at one point to kind of entertain myself when we weren't getting bashed around in basic training, I kept a little hardcover book that I wrote letters to myself as a fictional character I'd created just to pass the time.
That's a pretty creative way to do that.
And so when I got out, I met some guys in my barracks my first go round, and they were playing the tabletop game Werewolf the Apocalypse.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the first time I'd ever really got into any of the tabletop gaming stuff. I was about 18 years old at that point. And I got into a couple games of that with them. And they didn't meet all the time, so we didn't have that many games. And I got out and got out under bad circumstances the first time. Nothing major, just it wasn't great. And I pretty much lost everything I owned. And so I'm having to kind of hang out with whoever will take me in at the point I was homeless. And I run into this group of guys who where I was staying at, and they would get together on the weekends to do these pen and paper RPGs. It was Palladium Fantasy and Rifts back then was what we were mostly playing. And that's kind of what got me into that. So later on, after I'd gotten back into the military and then got out again, this was around 2006, we met this other military family because my wife was still active duty. And we put together a game group with them who were doing Palladium Fantasy and Pathfinder with alternating GMs. So the guy comes to me, he's like, hey, he's like, we're short party members, so it would help if you could play 2 characters.
Oh, that's tough.
And so he's like, so here's what we're going with. So a friend of mine, because I had been kind of poking at wanting to write a fantasy story, and a friend of mine helped me design these centaurs. And I was like, well, let's try to roll up some of these centaurs and this werewolf hunter character that I was tinkering with the ideas for in this game. And he always knows when the camera's on. So we did that, and the game ended up going on and off for like 5 or 6 years. This same game.
That's a good campaign.
And so Grayston and Maeryden, throughout the course of that game, ended up actually developing into like a married couple.
These were the 2 characters you were
Yeah,
playing?
the 2 main characters in my book ended up developing into this married couple who were completely odd together because you had a centaur sorceress and then assumably human werewolf hunter who just didn't seem to belong together to begin with. And over time, because the way the party was made up and the fact that I rolled Maeryden as a super pragmatic, so she ended up doing a lot of the stuff the rest of the party didn't want to do with her magic.
No, like, it's got to get done, so I'm going to do it.
So she turned into like a magic Swiss Army knife because the other caster didn't want to do mundane, like non-magical things.
Okay.
And she ended up becoming a character the party liked so much that when the other campaign started, they asked me to bring her back for that campaign.
I had actually been going to ask if, because the book itself felt very much like a role-playing game. Like, you know, here's your first task, here's your second task. Like, it was very...
It's because that's kind of how the story played out. It started out very simple. Now, obviously, the backstory of Maeryden is not exactly simple, but what happens after that, it has to start out small scale for them to discover what actually happened. So they're kind of working their way across the world looking for anything that might give them a clue. You know what I mean?
It's not that you've never been invited, Tater. It's that you live in the wrong time zone, and I can't help that.
Yeah, that's a little difficult. It's why I don't have a group anymore.
When everyone he hangs out with is, 5-hour time difference.
Yeah, at least.
But yeah, you can definitely tell when reading the book how that that role-playing influence comes through. I'm not sure you'd be able to tell if you'd never done role-playing.
If you've never done it, yeah. And there were obviously things omitted from the book drafting process from the that occurred in the game, because some characters that were in the game do not appear in the book, and vice versa. There's obviously some things have been altered and translated and changed around to make the book work better.
So was the elf that appears as kind of a secondary character? Was she in the actual original party?
Melandris was originally an NPC I was asked to play to help the party out at one point.
I mean, you were just playing the whole party at this point.
I had 3. We had 6 players, but the problem was at the time one of them kind of had a bit of a problem.
That was
And
the pixie dust addiction.
no, that was the one who made a deal behind the party's back with the evil dragon and kind of got removed from the party later.
Well, everybody has their flaws.
So we had to keep making compensations because some of our early players were a little flaky before we got our main party together.
I mean, to be fair, I would consider going behind the party's back and making a deal with the evil dragon to just be really good role playing.
It was. The problem is he kept doing it.
The more frequently, players mess with each other, the less things I have to think up.
That was all fine. The problem was there were issues with him and his wife, and they kept bringing him to the game.
That's a whole different thing.
So he ended up not coming back eventually. But that being neither here nor there. Yeah, Melandris was one who came in later, on and off, which is why she's kind of on and off somewhat in the story. There's times where she'll just leave.
Yeah, well, there's one specific point where she just kind of disappears for like a week and then reappears kind of out of nowhere. I have my suspicions about the reasoning for that, but I won't spoil anything.
Fair enough.
So how did you actually decide that you were going to do this as a published full-on work? I mean, I have to say I personally would absolutely love to write a book, but I haven't got the attention span,
So after I got out of the military the second time, I was a little rough. I had very bad insomnia. I was addicted to caffeine pills because I really had a problem with going to sleep. So I had this long stretch where I could not get off the caffeine pills. It was actually causing me health problems. I wasn't sleeping. Which was kind of inherently what I wanted, but it was causing me other problems. And so my wife was getting ready to deploy again because I had just gotten out. And we had this period of time where my brother had to help me quit doing that. So I had to I had to focus on something, anything. And so I slowly kind of started trying to work out in my head in between, the RPG group stuff, where to direct some of my attention in between all this. And my friend Amanda, who's also the one who's done some of my concept art for the books, kind of said in passing, well, if there's so much stuff behind these, why don't you try to actually write it out? Because it sounds interesting. And then when browbeat Farv into writing the story, it wasn't easy. Between my own emotional stuff I had going on with extended family and friends and getting out of the military and whatnot, there were several times I almost hard stopped and just destroyed everything that I'd worked on and just gave up, like multiple times the first book. It was a big struggle for me initially. And my wife was very supportive, and she's like, I want to read the book, so you need to finish it. Because my wife, like you, she reads anything she can get her hands on almost. And
having an audience is always a really helpful way to stay motivated too.
What really came down to is, for me rushing to get the first one finished, is my dad got really, really sick. And my dad is not a big reader, but he was super excited when he found out that I was working on a book. And so was my mother, to be fair, because she's a big sci-fi fantasy person. And she's how I got into all that stuff growing up, despite our own differences. And there was a worry that my dad might not be around much longer. And I kind of panicked, and I was like, I want to do this one thing after years of us arguing and fighting that he would be proud of. And so go ahead.
No. Finish what you were going to say.
So I just kind of, I pushed harder into it. I tried to like really hard focus because like I want to get this published before something terrible happens. I managed to finally get it out. The publishing process was a nightmare because I can only publish through Amazon. I don't have a lot of money. I don't have a publisher, you know what I mean? So I had to find a cover artist because the one I had arranged initially couldn't do it in time. So I had to go get a second artist who's the one that does my covers now. And then I had to take that. We had to fight with how to figure out how to get the cover size to the print. I had to go and get the stuff copyrighted beforehand. And we had to wait for that to come back. And we got it out. And my dad was like pretty excited. My mother was super excited. She was showing it to her friends. And then as I was writing the second book, it turned out to be my mom that passed away.
Oh no.
Yeah.
I don't think I knew that.
She passed last year. She had a heart complication and she died in surgery.
I'm so sorry.
And my father, it's hard to write sometimes now because my father's in such rough shape. My mother's gone and I just kind of have to keep at it because I want to finish. At this point I want the story and the characters out there. The cost and money be damned. I just want to publish this stuff. I just want it out there.
Yeah, sometimes just finishing it is kind of the goal in and of itself, just doing the thing. Yeah, I get that.
I just want to get it out there. I want people to read it and maybe enjoy it because all the schlock, goofy shit I see on bookshelves so often, I'm like, I don't even know what to think of half of it. I look at the synopsis on the stuff and I'm like, but I've seen this somewhere before, and like a lot of it, I have seen it before because it's so similar. And the covers are all weird, like Photoshop generated crap.
I was telling somebody the other day I went to oh, sorry, Tater had a question. How many books are there going to be?
We're probably looking at least 3 in the main series. I had a couple of friends interested in me doing a book spin-off with one of the side characters, which I might do at least one of once I finish the 3rd book, depending.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've had 3 or 4 friends asking specifically about one character getting a spin-off.
I started to say that I went into the last time I went into a bookstore, they, have the table of, suggested reading material, and I picked up 6 books and read the back, and 5 of them were almost identical. Like, same type of character, same type of scenario, same, like, tragic backstory, same everything.
And it's like, there's nothing wrong with a tragic backstory, but it can't be exactly the same one done the same way, I guess. Because from reading mine, there's a bit of an unpleasant backstory with a couple of the characters, but the whole point is them going beyond it, not like dwelling on it.
Well, and it says something when that's so my mother used to run a thing for my brother after schools called Odyssey of the Mind. And what they would do is they would get a problem at the beginning of the year, and then they'd have to present the solution at the end of the year and see who came up with the most creative solution. And what she would do with her teams every year is have them sketch out what they thought the good solutions were and then immediately toss out the first 5 because those were going to be the same things that everyone else thought of. And it feels like writing has become like that. That so frequently, like, people just kind of cookie cutter their stories these days. So like they all kind of sound the same.
And the thing is, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that's one of the reasons I really enjoy independent books, because you don't have a publisher saying, look, this is the checkbox that we know sells books.
Yeah.
Therefore, people think all the time. So I do editing. Yeah. And people are reluctant to get an editor because they believe that editors will tell you how to change your story. That's what publishers do.
Yeah.
Editors just tell you where you have spelling errors. Yeah. Or in a book I did recently, the guy had a lot of military dates,
Mm.
and he'd made a mistake on one of the dates. And
Ooh.
so it had caused this like domino effect of like off dates the whole time. That's the type of things that editors look for. Your story is your story. We don't give a crap. But it's great to read all this stuff from people that aren't caught up in this publisher cookie cutter. This is what
And
we
it's
know
like
sells
when you
books.
mention this cookie cutter thing too, I to a limited extent imparted some elements of stuff I'd personally experienced into this. It's why it is kind of in some areas focused on, meeting people you have nothing to fucking common with, kind of being pushed together by circumstance, finding out that you might actually have something in common, or if there's a common ground you can stand on. People who don't make any sense together ending up together. That kind of, there's like a lot of elements of that in there. And there's also the the emotional side of it, and some of it there's so much in it that I tried to kind of use to the advantage of the story.
I think Tater is potentially giving you a backhanded threat if you don't finish this series.
Oh, he's already been on that. I don't want a George R.R. Martin. Ugh.
There you go. There's your motivation, not to be George Martin. Every author's goal now should not to not be George Martin. So tell us about the publishing process. You said that the publishing was kind of a nightmare, and where this was your first book and you didn't have somebody professional walking you through it. I assume it was a pain in the butt.
Well, the big problem I had... One second, let me kill my camera for a second. Oh, and my icon's not there. That's okay. I'm only killing the camera for a minute. Well, one of the biggest problems I had is the Amazon thing. It works fine once you figure it out. And if you're using it often and you don't forget things, it's probably not a problem at all. But for the size of book that I'm publishing, these hardcovers in particular, you need the cover to be X dimension so it will wrap around the book properly when it's printed.
Mm-hmm.
Oddly enough, that was the biggest problem I ran into during the publishing process. Was I had to keep going in and fiddling with the cover and resizing it and editing the cover to make it fit the dimensions of the finalized book.
So I have to ask, I did notice there was like a little bit of a black stripe on the edge. Was that because Amazon's covers were?
It's because...
Or is that was that in part of... I assumed it was part of the design because
it was partially... Yeah, it was partially designed that way because I did redesign the cover because of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I redesigned the cover to fit around that without having to get a completely new cover done.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, well, we could just put it on the edges and where the title's going to be on the spine, and that should work fine. It was done partially out of necessity and partially because I was like, well, it actually breaks it up enough that it doesn't cause a problem, so...
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't do the soft cover because I fought with it for a little while, and I was like, okay, I can't figure that out right now. I got the hardcover and the ebook sorted out. I'm just going to publish those.
I mean, it doesn't look bad. Like I said, I assumed that it was part of the design. Somebody actually had to point out to me that they weren't sure it was. And I was like, but it's perfectly even on both sides.
Yeah, we did that on purpose when we realized that we weren't going to be able to do it the other way. So it was technically by design, but it was done on an edit.
Sorry, say that again?
I said, well, it was technically by design, but it was done via an edit when we realized that we had the issues.
The dimensional issues.
With the dimensions of the cover.
Well, I mean, the other issue is they keep changing the size that they publish books in. You know, like I have it, since we were talking about George Martin, I have, I think the first 4 or 3 of his books are one size, and then like Actually, is it him?
And on that one, I'm not sure if that is an issue with his publishers or their printer publisher. Because the one thing I'll say about Amazon, I looked at the little program recently, and their dimensions for X books seem to have remained basically the same. It's just more a matter of you're going to have to be making sure stuff fits those proportions. So with those books, I'm not sure if that's a conscious decision being made or something's being pushed by the publishers.
I don't know. It feels like they started out with one size and then all of a sudden it became really popular to have those weird 3/4 like sized paperbacks.
It might have.
And they changed the size of hardcovers and I don't know, maybe it was to force people to buy different bookshelves so that the shelves were no longer the right.
Maybe.
Apparently you are not the only person to have
Yeah,
trouble with covers.
I didn't assume so. It's just not explained very well, and I'm gonna have to go and struggle with it again because it's been 2 years since I used it last.
Yeah. So you mentioned to me at one point that there's a process where you have to send things through copyright. What's that like?
That's as long as you're not trying to rip anybody off. That's actually not hard. All you do is you go. There's a .gov website for the Copyright Office, right? You go in there. You take the digital version of your work. You convert it into a PDF. You upload it to the Copyright Office on your account. And then you go through, you fill out your information, then you post that to them. And depending on how busy they are and how much stuff they have to kind of scrub through. So, for example, they told me both times it was going to be between 1 to 3 months for my work to clear copyright.
Mm-hmm.
But the first time I got it back in about 2 weeks. The second time it took about 3.
So they're overestimating or underestimating?
They seem to be overestimating, but I'm going to assume because they're overestimating on the assumption that if they start finding stuff that comes up as being flagged, that then they have to go through, the entire document looking for more stuff that's flagged as somebody else's copyright. That's my assumption. I've never had anything come back negative, so I'm not 100% sure on that.
That seems like, man, trying to figure out exactly what everyone's copyright is. That seems like a nightmare.
It's like, because the only thing is, like, there are, like, somebody was concerned because there were gnolls in my book. But I was like, gnolls don't belong to TSR or Wizards of the Coast or Hasbro. I was like, gnolls have been around since, like, ancient African mythology. They're everywhere. They're a creature that has existed longer than Hasbro has been around.
Well, keep in mind that Amazon managed to get the smiley face copyrighted.
Kind of, yeah. But I've already run that one through twice. It's not a copyright. I even looked it up specifically, the words. I was so paranoid the first time. I actually went through copyright lists looking for things in my book I thought might have a copyright issue, just to make sure.
That's actually a good point, though. I would not have. I mean, I know things like beholders are copyrighted.
Yeah, they are.
I would not have thought about gnolls. Things like orcs and gnolls, I just kind of tend to. I'm like, well, those have always existed, right?
And as I tried to change some things around, kind of like, how do I put this? I tried to make it where things were not just different enough to avoid copyright issues, but to feel slightly different. It's like, you'll know what a gnoll is in my book, but they don't act a lot of the time, especially the ones they're mainly dealing with, like D&D gnolls. Like the first group of gnolls you actually meet in this book, they're a literal mercenary army.
Yeah, I did notice that they were, they're not basically hyenas on hind legs that are kind of dumb.
Yeah.
Tater had a question up here. Let me see if I can scroll back to it.
Okay.
Your opinion of collector covers?
As an independent creator, okay, so I'll explain something about this process. Everything I do in these books comes out of pocket.
Mm-hmm.
My cover art varies, and I think it's worth what I pay for it. My cover artist varies between $600 and $700 for the cover. So I'm not gonna go out and have my artist do alternate covers. They're gonna cost me $600-700 a piece. So I don't have all that much use for that idea.
Tater, were you asking in general, or were you talking his books in particular?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. Because that's just my opinion on my own stuff. And I saw that, do they know they're in a book? Wow.
Yeah, puns.
He says
He's
in
asking
general.
in general.
I'm not actually a big fan of them, but my brother and I grew up reading DC and Marvel comics before they went completely stupid, and we were never really a big fan of the variant covers. It just seems like a weird way to kind of do that fear of missing out thing with a comic you might already have because it's got a different artist doing the cover. I'm not wild about it.
Money grabbing.
Mm-hmm.
When Tasha's Cauldron came out, the store that we got the alternate cover was the same. I don't know. It was like $3 more or something like that. It was a negligible difference, and yet that's what everyone special ordered. So they
Mm-hmm.
ended up carrying like 20 copies of that and none of the original cover. And I was like, man, isn't it going to be funny
Wow.
if the original cover ends up being the one that's
Being the rare
collectible?
one, yeah.
Yeah,
It reminds me of a story we used to get. At one point, briefly, I worked at a Kmart, right? And there was this thing where they would order, and Hasbro's always been guilty of this, but they would order, like, let's say, a bunch of He-Man figures, right?
mhm.
And what they would do is Hasbro would send them a crapload of He-Man and Skeletor figures, like more than they ordered, and then they would randomly throw in the other figures they ordered in there in lower amounts to try to sell the excess stock they made of like Skeletor and He-Man figures.
Well, I mean, nowadays they can't sell any of that stuff anyway. So Davey First says it seems like a cash grab. It is absolutely a cash grab.
Mm-hmm.
Except maybe in the case of like Kickstarters where it's, if you back the Kickstarter, then you get the special cover.
Yeah, that's a little different. Like I got on a Kickstarter a while ago for this big, I mean about this freaking thick of the old G.I. Joe comics.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things in the Kickstarter was like this special kind of leather-bound style cover, and I actually went for that one. But yeah, that's a whole different thing. That's part of what you're ordering. That's just an option they give you.
Well, and it lets, everybody know that you backed the Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, yeah, I think I would agree that a lot of those covers are just a way to get you to buy another version. It's like the original Aliens movies. I think my husband owns like 6 copies of Aliens and 6 copies of like Star Wars because he has like every single version they ever released.
You know, it's dumb, but like using The Thing as an example, the Carpenter version, my issue is like between the times we've moved and the times I've packed stuff up and forgotten where I put it, I have 2 DVD versions of The Thing and 2 Blu-rays simply because I thought I'd actually lost it.
Mm-hmm.
So when I have extra versions of something, especially with DVDs, that's usually what happened.
I just want to say a quick hey to the Yarn Witch.
Oh,
Thank
hey.
you for lurking in, hiding in the shadows as ye witches tend to do. I thought, speaking of witches, I thought your differentiation in the book of witches versus sorceresses was kind of interesting. You never specifically have anybody you don't have any characters specifically saying, well, the difference is yada yada yada.
Mm-hmm.
And yet you can tell that there's this very defined social difference in how they're treated. I really liked the subtlety of that. I thought that was really good.
Yeah, that does come up a little bit more in the second book again.
Mm-hmm.
So that should interest you because because in that world, and like I said, magic obviously works differently. You've seen in my world because magic is kind of rare.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of a bloodline thing, really. Whereas witchcraft is kind of viewed as kind of the very dirty, cheaty way to access the kind of magic you shouldn't really have.
Yeah, I sort of got the impression that sorceresses were bloodline based and witches
Hmm.
were kind of blood magic based.
Yeah. Do I?
This actually was going to be one of my questions for you. Was do you base characters on people you know or have known, or how people played things in games, or?
Well, it's funny. I've kind of done that with a couple of characters, but not really the main ones. For
Hmm.
example, have you gotten to the part where they
I
go in? Hmm?
I finished the book, so.
Okay, so when they go into the Nine Fathoms port,
Hmm.
that one really grumbly sergeant of the guard, Varkin,
Hmm.
I actually based him on Dick Miller,
Okay.
if you
I need.
remember that actor.
I was going to say I need context. What did he
He
play?
was he was a soldier in a lot of Roger Corman's old movies. He was also the neighbor with the snowplow in Gremlins.
Oh, yeah. Okay, got it.
And if you remember Carlo Nelvara, I actually based him on Robert Shaw's portrayal of Quint slightly.
I promise it's not much of a spoiler.
Not really, no. Because if you'd seen Jaws recently and looked at the way I have Carlo talk, or just some of the other kind of Easter eggy things like I did, like the shark jaws or the harpoon gun behind the bar.
I did like the harpoon gun. I that character was really interesting. The end result to that character was, I
Mm.
thought that was you have indirect lurking.
Indirectly. Yeah, unfortunately, one of our friends sometimes works an odd schedule.
Yeah, I get that. Um, what do you read when you're not writing?
Um, I used to read Jack London. I still do when I find my old copies of his books around. Call of the Wild, White Fang, that kind of thing. I read Stephen King when I was younger and fell out of love with that fairly quickly. I read Lovecraft. I read Tolkien. And Peter Benchley has actually been a huge one for me, which really made me very sad when he retired and then passed away not too long afterward.
Not a lot of fantasy. That's kind of an interesting.
Um, Tolkien, I did read a lot of. I saw more fantasy than I read outside of Tolkien.
Mhm.
Because when I was growing up, my mother and I saw both of the Conan films. We saw Dragon Slayer, The Sword and the Sorcerer. Good lord, trying to think. I saw the Record of Lodoss War anime, which I actually own. It's just that we watched so much fantasy stuff, I could not possibly remember all of it. Because growing
Lance
up, all we watched was like horror, sci-fi, and fantasy films a lot of the time.
Lance popped in to say hi.
Hey, hello, Lance.
Support to a fellow author. Um, but you said that your parents were your parents like artsy people? I mean, you said that
My
they
well,
sent you
my
to art school
father,
and.
yeah, my father, not the biological one, but the father that raised me.
Mhm.
He was actually a two-tour Vietnam vet. He didn't know much. He liked westerns and stuff like that. It was mom that kind of would drag him into sci-fi and fantasy stuff a lot of the time against his will. Um, no, mom was like the youngest daughter of like 8 children, and she was
Okay.
the one that kind of got into stuff. So granddad was really big on helping her get what she wants. She wanted to dance, she wanted to sing, and she never really got into the singing, but she was big into like the dancing. So like growing up, I saw oddly enough a lot of musicals. You know what I mean? Uh, West Side Story, freaking The Sound of Music, a lot of the crazy amounts of musicals. My mother loved that stuff because it less the music and more the dancing. So my mother actually was a dance instructor.
Mhm.
When she was younger, she ran a little studio in the town we were at. It was pretty successful at it until some personal stuff involving her and a mayor who didn't like her. She had to shut it down.
You and not that part, but I think you and Lance actually have some things in common as well as books. Then I seem to recall that. I seem to recall from his book that his mother was very big on music and musicals. And Davy Verse says he recommends that you might like James Hubert's books.
I have to look that up. Another reading I used to do, like I mentioned, is and I never read like the little ones, is I would get the big collected versions of comics that I liked and just read those all the way through.
Like the graphic novels?
Yeah, like
or
the graphic novels and like the big collected editions. Like I have a book of collected Punisher comics that's about that freaking thick.
Mm-hmm.
That I read all the way through several times, actually. Old X-Men, some of the stuff that I actually grew up reading or read later, I will reread, and I have novels I've read who knows how many times. There's a box here next to my desk that has some of my Lovecraft books and Tolkien books in it where I can reach them easily.
So you're very sort of visual in the stuff that you like reading. Considering that you started out in art school, did you consider like making this a comic at any point, or was it always designed to be? No, it was going to be a novel.
I'd considered it early on, but the issue is a lot of the stuff I went through, I kind of lost drawing. I just kind of completely, like, it broke, so to speak. I couldn't sit down and draw anymore. I tried, and it was just frustration upon frustration trying to even get back into it.
Well, I was thinking like if you partnered with somebody who did a lot of drawing, like at least I think you have to be able to see visually, even if you're not the one doing the drawing, because you have to know what it's going to look like in your head when you're writing.
I'll answer Potato's question just a sec. I'd consider that, but the problem is I don't know any artists with that kind of time. I know a couple of artists, but I don't know if artists with that kind of time, and I don't have that kind of money for that level of collaboration on a comic because that's a lot more expensive.
Well,
That's
usually I
yeah.
think when people collaborate, usually you're not paying the artist. It's a dual project, I think, for most people. I could be
A lot
wrong,
of the
but
time, yeah. But I
I
I
think
don't
it's
know
a
anybody else who's in that kind of. Most of the artists I know are about as broke as I am, so, so we don't really have the money to pull together. Sadly,
apparently Rachel has experienced this. She says even then it won't look the way you want it
yeah,
to.
that's true too. In answer to something Revan asked, he said, "How do you cope with when you make a name and you later say this is so stupid, but it just sticks?" I don't actually know. In the stuff I've actually bothered to try to publish, I've never really run into like looking at a name going, I don't really like that name. I've had to rewrite paragraphs upon chapters before, but the names have never really had anything I've decided I wanted to change.
I was going to say your kid gets beat up on the playground, but
Wow. Well, there's that too, I guess.
I mean, honestly, like how many people do in fact name their kids dumb things sometimes?
Yeah, I've seen it. Ugh.
Not all names are cool in real life. It's funny though. I think it was shoot, he writes Native American mysteries. Tony Hillerman
Hmm.
made a comment once about the fact that he had been at an event, and I can't remember what it was. I think there was an eagle that just sort of like flew into the middle of the event.
Whoa.
Or so I could be misremembering what the event is, but there was something impressive that happened. And somebody said, "You should put that in one of your books." And he said, "I can't because people expect books to be more realistic than fiction books to be more realistic than they expect real life to be." So I think it's the same way with names.
I think too that obsession with some people with things being realistic is sometimes kind of sabotaging, even to themselves.
Do you
When it
mean
comes to
the readers,
entertainment,
readers or the authors?
to readers, I think readers or people who play games or watch fiction, that obsession with things needing to be realistic has really killed a lot of creativity.
That's interesting. I tend to say I can delay, like I can what's the term? Shoot. I'm having a brain spaz here.
That's okay. My head
I
hurts
can
too.
I can set reality aside but I
Suspend
can't.
disbelief. There you go.
Thank you. That is what I was trying to think of. I can suspend disbelief. I cannot take a pickaxe to it.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
Well,
unless it's something like an '80s book, which is intentionally very comic-y.
yeah. It's internal. I feel it's like internal consistency needs to be a thing, which a lot of comics and games that go for too long kind of tend to screw up anyway. But like for example, in my world, only specific bloodlines can use sorcery, and I won't spoil anything, but there's 3 or 4 technically that can use some kind of magic. If I have somebody just randomly for no explicable reason start throwing lightning bolts in the 3rd book, we have a problem. That's not consistent. It just throws everything off.
Right, and there's a difference between not following the rules of our reality and not following the rules of your own reality.
Yes.
I do think that's a huge difference, and I think that you may be right as far as the creativity of things not lining up with our own reality.
Mhm.
But I also think that there are too many, especially for television, there are too many writers out there that are just like, this person's powers are whatever they need to be.
Yeah, I flag that as internal inconsistency. That just doesn't. Too many people write Deus Ex Machina like on a snap of the fingers just to explain whatever away.
I mean, yeah. I suspect in some cases, especially when you have a series, honestly, like Gandalf was a little bit of a Deus Ex Machina, but at least he was
Yeah.
in the story ahead of time, so you knew that, he had.
And it's hard to explain in the movies, but in the books they kind of hint at what he is and why he might be able to do things like this.
And if you've read the Silmarillion, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course, if you've read the Silmarillion, you're a little bit insane.
It's on the shelf right over there.
Couldn't a random magic wielder have been a distant relative from a line long since forgotten? I was thinking about it would be a really good way to catch somebody, having kids from the wrong side of the sheets.
That would be something that would have to happen down the line, because considering in book 2 what's revealed about what's been going on with the elves and the fact that there are barely any centaurs left.
So that was one thing I was trying to figure out. Did they all live in that one city? Like, was that basically a genocide?
Pretty
I'm sorry.
close.
Yes, that was spoilers, but
yes,
it's like
that was actually a spoiler. It's
but
in
it
the
was like-
first third. It's like the 3rd or 4th chapter when that starts.
I was going to say it's like very
yeah
quick in the book. So if this were a movie, it would be in the trailer. So, but then the entire plot would be in the trailer.
But yeah, just Potatoes yelling about something. I don't know what we said.
I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what word it is I can't say.
Okay, I'm lost on that one.
I don't know. I also get scolded for not saying Minecraft nearly frequently enough in
apparently you can't say the G word. Oh my god, YouTube, are you serious?
What was the G word?
What happened to Glaren Fort?
Oh. I was like, what did I say? I don't even remember what my wording was.
I mean, it's accurate, but apparently YouTube doesn't like that word. It very nearly was. There's hints that some might have escaped, but there's also
social justice worrying at its finest. You cannot say we want to talk about atrocities, but you can't actually say the word that describes those atrocities.
I don't even know anymore.
China might get upset. I mean, did I say that? So you have another book coming out very soon.
Yes, I do.
What's the title on that one?
It's literally the Farvithia Chronicle 2. I didn't want to go completely batshit because too many franchises do that and then people get lost.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
I want it to
when
be. I'm hoping. I've got the copyright back. We're in the process of doing page layouts right now. Once page layout is done, then I get to fight with the cover program, which should hopefully only take a week or so to get that fixed. And then it's usually about a 2 to 3 week wait for them to get the publishing started, like the hard copy publishing started. So I'm hoping to have it available by March. I'm hoping, depending on how long page layout takes.
Tater says Farvithia Boogaloo.
Yeah, I see what you did there.
Do we get a little sneak peek?
I can do that, actually. I have a page up. All right, let me scroll away.
So you heard it here first, everybody. Before publication, you get a little taste test of the new book.
All right. I will just start. This is in the middle of one of the chapters. There shouldn't be anything here that's going to be major spoilers. All right. I'm going to try to alter my accent enough not to throw this off. We should proceed forward, she agreed after a long breath, turning towards the arched exit to the adjoining chamber. I must remove myself from this place as quickly as possible, she muttered, while trudging past the pile of corpses on the side of the chamber and through to the next. Grayston followed her out, glancing around the chamber suspiciously before halting her advance. Wait, Maeryden. There's something not quite right, he cautioned her as his eyes narrowed behind the dark glasses. They've realized that we're down here, I'd wager. I don't see anything, Maeryden whispered, scowling at the shadowy chamber ahead of them. Why is it so much darker in here than the previous chamber? She huffed, starting to raise her torch. Grayston gripped her wrist, lowering the torch and putting out the flames. I know why, he growled in a low tone. They've extinguished the torches. The last few of the werewolves Victoria brought with her are on the other side of the chamber, but they're not searching for us. It's almost as if they were left to stand guard, Maeryden muttered half to herself. That seems like a most peculiar decision. What reason could they have for such behavior unless they were positioned here to protect their leader, Grayston finished her thought. That could mean that both she and the ancient gate are just ahead of us. More the pity for those four I'm looking at, as we haven't the time to squander on them, he grumbled as he loaded silver rounds into his weapons. Grayston, if you use those in this enclosed space, the sound will be like a clap of thunder, Maeryden whispered with an incredulous look. She's certain to hear that. She already knows that we're here, Grayston assured her as he readied Ironhoof and lined up a shot. A creature who's lived this long would never be caught entirely unaware. She must have known something was amiss as soon as the conflict began outside the crypt. We've reached the point of no return, my love, he muttered before pulling the trigger on the rifle. The shot struck one of the werewolves in the side of the head, the others snarling in response as their packmate dropped dead. Grayston rapidly dropped the empty casing, replacing it as Maeryden fired her orb bolt into the darkened chamber in an effort to cover him. Though Maeryden couldn't see them, Grayston could see that the others had already covered half the length of the chamber. He fired again, the round striking another werewolf in the chest as it leapt towards Maeryden. Maeryden gasped in surprise as the dead lycanthrope collapsed so near to them, turning instinctively at another sound nearby. Lashing out impulsively with the orb bolt, she bashed a third werewolf across the head hard enough to stagger it and draw blood. She shouted something incoherent before firing the bolt into her stunned adversary at close range. The werewolf crashed to the floor, though Maeryden blasted it twice more in the back of the head in a display of exasperation. The last of the werewolves had reached them before Grayston reloaded, forcing him to drop Ironhoof and draw his silver sword with haste. He slashed the attacker across the forearm as they attempted a claw swipe, causing the creature recoil with a snarl of pain. Grayston wasn't given much respite, the enraged werewolf attempting to rake him with its claws a second time. He forced it back again with the sword, retrieving one of the pistols from beneath his coat. The werewolf lunged this time, jaws agape as it tried to grab for him. Grayston raised the pistol swiftly, fired it into the open maw before his enemy could react. The back of its head burst in an unpleasant manner, Grayston slamming the sword into its heart as it collapsed forward. Stepping aside, he let the corpse slump to the chamber floor as he cleaned the blade. Ugh, I'll hear no end of it once Eveline sees the state of my clothing, Grayston muttered as he flicked blood from his sleeve. I can already hear her berating me about the bloodstains, he sighed before turning to Maeryden with a tired-looking smile. Thankfully, you look none the worse for wear, my dear. I fear that my outward appearance holds no indication of my actual condition at the moment, she responded with a long sigh. I am unharmed, however, and certainly grateful enough for it. Perhaps Farvithia and Marcellus will both continue to grant us some clemency during this rather dangerous effort of ours. Mercy from our deities would be a boon for certain, Grayston agreed as he retrieved Ironhoof to reload it. Just for the sake of certainty, though, I think that we ought to take the majority of our personal safety upon ourselves, he attempted to joke. Whatever the outcome, it lies beyond this chamber, he added decisively as he motioned across the large and ancient chamber.
Okay. I do have to ask,
Yes.
are they actually married yet?
Technically, yes. They are
Technically?
recognized. They are recognized as married, but they haven't had time for a ceremony. But yes, by that point, they are
no.
actually married.
So no, they are not technically married. They're just seen by everybody as being married, but they haven't
Pretty
actually had
much,
this.
yeah. Because there's been so much going on, they haven't had a chance yet.
The mention of a ceremony comes up so many times, and they get interrupted every time. It's almost like the in a movie, it would be like the comedic bit where like we're gonna get married. Oh nope, you gotta run off to this other thing first.
Right.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you coming. If you want to tell everybody where you're going to be and what you're up to other than writing books.
Right. Well, obviously, this is my book. The links come up for a couple times. I have a channel called Farvithian Guard. It is mostly a recorded gaming and streaming site. We have a stream tonight in about, well, close to 2 hours, 8 o'clock my time. It is 6 o'clock here right now. So 8 o'clock, we will be going live playing Back for Blood, because that's what the people on the channel voted for tonight on the poll. And Thursday, we'll be doing Guild Wars, unless something changes, in which case I will stream something else when my players can't make it for that. And there's a few other things coming up this week. We've got more of the newest Sniper Elite game, Mass Effect, Astrobot, a few other things mixed up here and there. So if you guys like some of that stuff, or just like our stupid sense of humor, you're welcome to come check some of that out.
Okay. Again, thank you very much. The link to both your book and your channel will be in the description, just in case anybody is looking for it later on. This will be reposted with a few edits and corrections. Like, namely, I make everything past tense instead of future tense in the description. I am the Eclectic Goat on Discord, here, and Twitter. Wednesday, we will have my show Slice and Dice, where we're going to be talking about, well, we're going to be eating pizza, talking about disgusting pizza toppings, and and talking about tabletop games that no one has ever heard of. Interestingly, I have ended up with 3 people who all have black and white icons, so I'm referring to it as the monochrome episode. And then next Monday, we are going to have the first episode of Shows You've Never Seen, where people who missed the good television in the 90s and early 2000s, we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into some of my underappreciated favorite shows, and have people who've never gotten to see any of it. Ooh, is that Kraken?
Mm-hmm.
Love Kraken. Get to sit around and watch, and we get first-time impressions from people who've not only not seen those shows, but never seen television like it. So hopefully that's going to be a good time. We're going to start out with Carnival, which was an early 2000s show put out by HBO, and was the reason they were willing to greenlight Game of Thrones. So
Yeah.
it was one of the largest casts ever put on television at the time, and you definitely... I'm going to see if I can get away with playing the startup without anybody...
I saw the conversation in the chat.
The pineapple fight continues. Save it for Wednesday,
wow,
folks.
guys.
Save it for Wednesday. So yeah, you'll be able to see, the Game of Thrones startup was kind of a big deal when it came out, but you can definitely see how the Carnival influenced that. So I'm really looking forward to that. Things have been great.
Um,
We're at 330. I'm really hoping to hit 350 by the end of the
Potato is
month.
expressing some concern about Carnival just in the chat there.
Well,
Guess we'll have to find out.
yeah, I'm not actually going to do a full watch. I'm going to have them watch it ahead of time, and then we're going to do the
okay. So it's
MMM
just a discussion kind of thing.
every 10 seconds thing. The trick is they can't watch it until right before, so it's still fresh with them. So they're still doing the WTF. So, yes, and Eraserhead is going to go from being Supermod to being a panel member for the first time ever.
Oh, okay.
So he's going to do great. So hopefully we will see you all on Wednesday and next Monday. And I hope that everyone has a great evening.
Later.
In a room lit by computer glows, a goat inspects striking a pose. Mic in hand, she starts the show. Questions fly, authors disclose. Indy offers in the seat of fame, tales of adventure or love untamed. Writers who deserve more acclaim, sharing their stories, joys and pain. Eclectic goat asks what's your dream. Chat asks questions as they stream. A quirky quest through the unforeseen. Authors laughing, eyes agleam. Questions common and unique, tale both modern and antique. Of writing and edits we will speak, of the author's world we'll take a peek. Books on high like paper towers, stories blooming like summer flowers. Tales for readers to devour, moments made in eclectic hours. Eclectic goat asks what's your dream. Chat asks questions as they stream. A quirky quest through the unforeseen. Authors laughing, eyes agleam. Eclectic goat asks what's your dream. Chat asks questions as they stream. A quirky quest through the unforeseen. Authors laughing, eyes agleam. Authors laugh, eyes agleam.